Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam.
And I'm Maartje.
And we like World War II media and we want to talk about it.
Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. I hope you've had a nice Christmas. I don't know when this is airing, but I still hope you had a nice Christmas. This week we are talking about the 6888, which came out in December 2024. It was directed and written by Tyler Perry, and it's based on the true story of the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion, the only Black Women's Army Corps unit to serve in Europe during World War II. It's widely available on Netflix, and there's also a PBS documentary of the same name that you can watch on the PBS website. And you read a book, right, Sam?
Yeah, actually, when I went to the World War II Museum in New Orleans earlier this year, I picked up a book called One Woman's Army, A Black Officer Remembers the WWII by Charity Adams Early. And she's obviously a prominent figure in this movie. So it was really cool to get to see this movie after I'd read the book.
Yes. What did you think of this movie?
So I knew it was a Tyler Perry movie, so I adjusted my expectations accordingly because he's super hit or miss. And I did find it kind of hallmarky. I found some of the dialogue pretty schlocky. I would say I was underwhelmed. I'm glad it was made. I think it's an important movie. And I thought Kerry Washington was a highlight, but she's always great. But generally speaking, I wouldn't highly recommend it or anything. How about you?
Like you, I was pretty much looking forward to this movie, which also meant that I lowered my expectations because the movies I've been looking forward to have turned out to be pretty bad. I enjoyed the movie while watching, and then the more I thought about it, the less I liked it. I thought it was a really obvious Netflix production. I thought some of the characters were maybe a little bit caricature, especially the white commanders in this were very on the nose, annoying. And for a movie about Black women, I thought there was a very prominent white storyline in there that didn't seem all that necessary to me. But I know why they did it, but it just felt like such a Netflix production. Like, I get what you're saying about the quality for sure. But still, I don't feel like I wasted my time or anything. So that's good.
I will say, if you're really curious about this topic, I do really recommend the Adams memoir. She really doesn't pull any punches about the racism they were absolutely steeped in. At the same time, she has a really vivid recall for details. She's very no nonsense. She has a good sense of humor. So if you're curious about this, definitely pick up a copy of the memoir.
Perfect. Let's get into the movie.
We get some opening cards that say, based on a true story and the accounts of living witnesses. And then there's a quote from Mary McLeod Bethune that says, "We are anxious for you to know that we want to be and insist on being considered a part of our American democracy, not something apart from it."
I thought this opening, like the opening with a quote, we get those a lot. And I think they're very useful to kind of ground you into either the time period or the feeling of a movie. And I enjoy that generally. So
yeah, and you get a sense right away that this movie is doing a lot of historical heavy lifting because up until recently, these women didn't get a lot of recognition.
No. So after the title card, we open with a scene set in San Pietro, Italy in December 1943. American soldiers wait with their guns up, ready for an advance. There's a really, really big battle, in the middle of which a plane goes down. Another soldier tries to save the pilot, but he is very obviously is no longer alive. But the soldier does collect a letter from the pilot's pocket and brings it to be placed in the mail, which is a lead up for what's going on in this movie.
Yeah, I wasn't mad at this as a framing device if we had followed it a bit more. If the idea was like, oh, the letter's going to go in the mail and then we're going to follow it as it passes through all these hands and then as it goes directly to the 6888. But it kind of got lost a little bit immediately. And also, it really felt like an excuse just to have a battle scene. Like Tyler Perry was like, it's a World War II movie. We have to show guys getting launched 30 feet into the air by explosions and a plane crash and whatever else.
Yeah, I kind of wish there hadn't been a battle because I thought the special effects were kind of bad. I was like, oh, shame.
No, I agree. And I don't think it was strictly necessary, but
And also, they were in trenches. I don't think they were supposed to be in trenches, but I don't know quite enough to say for certain.
probably depends on the battle. There were times, I guess, when people were in foxholes and trenches. I don't know if Tyler Perry did that kind of research for this movie, but
Me neither.
well, we flipped from this very gloomy gray battlefield to a really brightly saturated with color sort of scene in Bloomfield, Pennsylvania in 1942. We are introduced to Lena Darracott King, played by Ebony Obsidian, and her friend Abram David, played by Greg Sulkin. As he picks her up outside of school, they have a little racist showdown with one of the other students. It's one of those where it's like they think that you're not going to understand the racism that the characters are facing on like just an absolutely institutional and ubiquitous level. So they just want to put it right in your face. So the dialogue is a bit clunky, but we do learn that Abram is going to fight overseas and that the other white students don't approve of their relationship. And neither does Lena's mother, Emma, played by Donna Briscoe, who is also trying to be realistic about their financial odds of being able to send Lena to college.
There's one thing I like about this friendship / relationship, and that's their like pilot dialogue stick that they've got going in the car. I thought that was pretty cute, to be honest. I don't remember what it was, but it was really cute.
Yeah, they're pretending they're in a plane and they're evading German fighters and they're sort of reciting like radio dialogue back and forth to each other.
Yeah. So Abram has a going away party, and on the night of this party, he very politely kisses Lena while they've snuck outside. And Lena stays behind. Sometime later, after not receiving any letter from him, she finds out that he's died. And this is what motivates her to join the WWII, the Women's Army Corps.
Yeah, so we've talked about the WWAC a little bit before. It had been created in May of 1942 as the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, which was an emergency reserve without full military status. Obviously, if you don't have full military status, you don't get full military benefits. And so there was a movement to get women included in the regular army. And that happened in July of 1943. Additional legislation was passed eliminating the auxiliary status and incorporating the Women's Army Corps directly into the Army. This was the only branch of the military in which Black women were allowed to enlist at its inception. The first class of officer candidates, which actually included Charity Adams, consisted of 440 women, 39 of whom were Black. There was a 10% quota, which was a maximum of Black women who were allowed to enlist. Yeah. More than 6,500 Black women served in the American Armed Forces in World War II, including 855 in the 688.
I have some issues with Lena, and not with her joining or her motivation to join, but she keeps saying very tritely she wants to fight Hitler. And I thought this was just the way it was written. It seems so glib or something. I can't really tell what annoys me about it, but something does.
Yeah, almost the whole. So in real life, we don't know if real life Lena was romantically involved with real life Abram or not, or if they were just friends. But it really felt like we needed to be spoon-fed a motivation for her to join the WWAC, when in fact, a lot of women joined just because it offered opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise had. Now, Black women found it especially difficult because you had to enlist in a lot of places by going into a post office and they'd be turned away right on site just because of the color of their skin. But nevertheless, joining the WWAC would allow you to, for example, access GI benefits after the war, which actually Charity Adams did. And that's how she ended up getting more education.
Yeah, that's good. I did try and research a little bit. I did find one source that said it was the final reason for her to join Abram's death, but it didn't say whether they were romantically involved. But the actual Lena did advise on the movie, so there's a chance that it's true. We don't know.
Yeah, there was a quote from Tyler Perry saying something like, well, Lena said they weren't romantically involved, but, she was so classy. She would never kiss and tell. And I'm like, okay, well.
Maybe just listen to what she has to say, right?
So we're in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia in 1944, which I believe is a bit of a skip from real life. The 688 were first stationed in Des Moines, Iowa, but we're skipping right to Georgia. After experiencing segregation on the train and meeting some new friends, including a frenemy named Johnny May, played by Shanice Shante, Lena begins her career in the military in earnest. we meet commanding officer Major Charity Adams, played by Kerry Washington, who runs a very tight ship.
What did you think of her friends and the way they were written and played?
Yeah, they felt a bit caricaturish to me, especially the Johnny May character. Johnny May, she's from the South. Her humor is a bit bawdy and raucous. She doesn't apologize for herself at all. She's a bit over the top. There's like a little circle of friends there. One of them is the sort of like pretty glamorous one who's religious, the daughter of a preacher. And another one actually is kind of interesting. I'm sorry I didn't write her name down, but at the time, if you were mixed race in a lot of situations, especially if you were maybe Hispanic, they would let you, when you enlisted, choose if you wanted to fight in a segregated unit or a white unit. And she chose the segregated unit, which is, certainly a choice. And yeah, I thought that they could have been written better. I think Tyler Perry wrote the script, so perhaps consulting some actual women would have been helpful.
Yes, I thought the same thing. I thought the conversation they have on the train is quite nice. But also, like you said, it's a bit bland and maybe surface level conversation. It doesn't feel, and that's my gripe, I think, with the entire movie. None of it has any depth to it, or not much anyway. So, like I said, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't too excited about it afterwards.
Yeah, they just have a sort of flat quality to them that makes you doubt that they're going to get fleshed out in any meaningful way.
Which ends up being true, unfortunately. We also get another kind of side storyline a little bit. We meet Eleanor Roosevelt, played by Susan Sarandon, and she sees a woman waiting outside the gate of her home and finds out that the woman hasn't received any letters from either of her sons, who are overseas, and this woman has been standing out in the rain. She discovers that this is a broader problem due to the significant mail backlog. And there's a meeting between her husband, FDR, played by Sam Waterston, noted black educator and activist Mary McLeod Bethune, which we got the quote from in the beginning, played by Oprah Winfrey, and some military brass to determine on how to resolve the issue.
Bethune did work with Eleanor Roosevelt in real life to try and find a role for Black women of the WWII overseas. Roosevelt was noted for really being kind of an ally to communities of color. She once went to a conference in Alabama, and due to segregation, they had sat the Black delegates on the other side. So she actually requested to sit next to Mary. And Bethune herself was a national advisor to FDR and 4 other presidents. And she had formed a coalition of Black leaders known as the Black Cabinet to advise the president on Black issues. She was also a civil rights activist. She was the founder of a university, founder of many organizations, including the National Council of Negro Women. And Bethune was the only Black woman present at the founding of the United Nations in San Francisco in 1945, representing the NAACP. So extraordinary woman, very impressive. And it's Susan Sarandon in some truly questionable teeth prosthetics, because Eleanor Roosevelt did have bad teeth, but man, it's pretty noticeable in this movie.
I also thought, I kind of wish it hadn't been Oprah for this role, because all I could see was Oprah.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I guess she only has a couple of lines, so.
Yeah, true.
Lena struggles in training. It's not her gift, she's better at other things. Meanwhile, Adams attempts to get the women proper orders, just something to do, but none are forthcoming as the army doesn't seem to believe that they're capable of any important tasks. The women continue to experience racism. There's a scene in a movie theater in which male army personnel attempt to get the Black female officers to move to the back. And difficulty obtaining meaningful work due to discrimination was a problem for Black women across the armed forces. And actually, on March 9th, 1945, 54 of the 100 Black women stationed at Fort Devens refused to show up for work, basically going on strike to protest against their treatment and working conditions. A lot of these were women who were educated, and they were getting assigned janitorial tasks. They were getting assigned to clean up after the white women, who were getting the medical technician jobs and, the more beneficial ones that would teach you actual skills. And so they were ordered to go back to work under threat of court-martial. 4 of the women refused. They ended up being court-martialed, but they received a lot of widespread public support, and the charges against them were eventually dropped. But this was definitely not an isolated incident. This was an issue all across the armed forces. And so when we see Adams in this movie fighting to get actual orders for the women and get them an actual meaningful job to do, this would have been extremely realistic.
The 4 women getting court-martialed kind of reminds me a little bit of the Tuskegee Airmen who got court-martialed after being in a fight in the officers' club. And it feels just about as unfair as this does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Adams goes overseas and soon realizes the magnitude of the job that's been assigned to them. They've been assigned to get the mail going.
They get orders finally to go overseas and sort the backlog of mail, but it's not immediately clear what the job is or what the size of the job is or what they're going to have to do. And they don't get orders from the War Department.
She has a nemesis in General Holt, played by Dean Norris, who tries to prevent her from succeeding at every possible turn, including assigning unsuitable living and working conditions. The enlisted women of the 6th WWII make a dangerous journey overseas by ship, and they don't have an escort or anything. They just have to go and hope they don't get torpedoed.
Yeah, that would have been a frankly unpleasant ship journey, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I don't really like Dean Norris in this at all. I thought he was the most caricature character of all the cast in this.
He's kind of an amalgam of a bunch of different white people from real life. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, from reading the Adams memoir, that her CO, when she was in training, was kind of on her side and was actually trying to find, once she had become the leader of this battalion, he was trying to find her stuff to do. They sort of combined a bunch of different white people. Halt is there at every turn, twist and turn, which, wouldn't have been the case in real life. I guess I understand why they streamlined it for the movie.
Yeah, I did there's one other, either he's a runner or he's a different commander, I don't know, but there's one guy that's just constantly smiling whenever she does something right, but he's in the background, but he's secretly smiling at her success. I'm like, okay, thank you, one ally at least.
Yeah. They arrive in Glasgow, Scotland in February of 1945. The women of the 6th WWII must march for General Halt immediately after their long, terrible voyage. You can imagine that they had some sleepless nights. Probably their uniforms aren't in the best shape, but they have to get off and march. In March they do. They acquit themselves really well. And they immediately begin the task of getting their accommodations up to snuff and sorting the mail because they have this huge job. They've been given 6 months. The backlog when the women arrived consisted of 3.7 million pieces of undelivered mail, including 6 airplane hangars of Christmas packages that had been returned during the Battle of the Bulge. They worked around the clock. Each 8-hour shift averaged more than 65,000 pieces of mail sorted. And as Adams says in her memoir, as the women became immersed in the delivery of the mail to the men at the front, their appreciation for the importance of mail grew. The longer we were away from home, the more we understood what had become sort of a motto: no mail, low morale.
That's good. I did like that Adams at first, when she first realized they got 6 months, she thought, oh, this is going to be easy. And then she saw the amount of mail. I thought that was quite an interesting way of showing her. She was like, wait, they are wanting for us to fail, which was the case, I bet, in real life.
Yeah, truly wild, because we will get to this, but they do manage to clear that backlog in half the time they were given.
I think they're located in a school or a former school or something, and it's in complete shambles, so it's not ready and waiting for them. They have to first get the school in order to be able to process this mail in the first place.
Yeah, and if I recall from Adams's memoir, she talks about how she got there and the building was kind of in shambles, and she was like, okay, so do I get cleanup crews? Do I get engineers? Do I get people to help? And the army was basically like, nah. So the women had to clean up and do repairs and do a lot of this stuff themselves.
The whole thing feels entirely racist, too.
It is. I mean, never let it be downplayed that these women were facing extraordinary racism at all times.
Yeah, they have a shitty job to do, and on top of that, it's racist. And almost impossible because they are not allowed to do much to the mail to be able to figure out where it's supposed to go. So it's really just difficult as well.
Yeah, super hard job. I was reading online that some of the packages had actually been there since the Christmas before, the Christmas of 1943. And so if you can imagine, there's food in there. It's been all chewed by rodents. The labels are worn away. Some of the packages are wet. It's just not a good situation.
Nope. Adams, not having received official orders from the War Department, takes matters into her own hands and informs them that she's taken charge. I really liked this bit. I thought this was great.
Yeah, and Adams did do this in real life. She eventually was like, "Look, I know that I'm in charge here, but at some point, someone is going to come and question me, or one of the women under my command is going to question me, like where I got my authority from." And she's like, "We're just going to document it. We're going to get it on paper." So she sent them a message being like, "Yeah, I'm taking charge here. This is my show now."
Good. I did really like her performance, to be honest. I thought she was great.
Yeah. Lena has been spending time with Private Hugh Bell, played by Jay Reeves, but she is still very emotional about the loss of Abram. And one day she has a big old meltdown at work. They find dog tags sometimes with the mail, so she just sort of casually throws the dog tags. And Lena's very upset about this because each of those dog tags is, someone who has died.
Yeah, I did enjoy the moment between Lena and Adams when they have a little heart to heart. I thought that was quite good.
Mm-hmm. And I think real life Lena did marry Hugh Bell after the war, so we get to see their little courtship.
She even says so, I think, in the little almost post-credit scene where she reads, the actual Lena reads a little bit from a piece of paper. She's
Yeah.
like, "Oh yes, I did marry you." So I thought this was kind of cute. I also thought it was nice that they, even if this didn't happen in real life, I like that they allowed her to grieve for a bit before they wander off to someone else. Like, for a movie, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, that's true. It did almost feel like they started the movie kind of trying to focus on Lena, and then once things really got underway, it became the Addams movie, which I wasn't mad about because obviously Kerry Washington is great, but also it kind of felt like a tug of war between these two plot lines that made it maybe would have been better to focus on one or the other.
I wonder if that's because Lena, the actual Lena, was still alive and available to advise. I wonder if she'd no longer been alive, if there'd been less of a story based on her.
Yeah, maybe.
A chaplain, played by Nick Harris, joins their unit and he immediately proves to be a dick. He's gross and he's racist. So Adams kicks him out and she says, quote, "Can she help you with your bags?" in referral to another black officer. And he's like very upset about this.
This did happen in real life. This chaplain came and he had this church service where he was talking about how immoral it was that they would have these dances sometimes on the weekends and the women were dancing and flirting and having a couple of drinks. And he did this just absolutely terrible church service. And when he came back from it, Adams was like, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're not doing it here." And she just kicked him right out. She's very no nonsense about it in her memoir. It's a fun passage.
Yeah, in the movie, they kind of make it specifically about Adams as well. So I wonder if that was also true in real life. You probably don't know. Probably doesn't specify.
Oh, I don't remember. It's been a little while since I read it.
I did like the dance scene, by the way. When we see one of those dances and they have lots of fun, and I'm like, yes, fun.
Yeah, I did like there was a couple of scenes where Adams let her hair down a little bit, and those were kind of fun because we did mostly get Adams, the very tight ship running officer.
I also really liked her second, and I don't know her name anymore, but the second officer.
The character's name is Lieutenant Campbell, but I don't remember the name of the actor.
All right. Well, I thought she was great too. I like their little dynamic together.
Yeah.
Because we need friendships like that and support like that.
Yeah, absolutely. The women continue to make progress in improving the system for sorting parcels and letters. They must try everything from tracing the origin of fabric and perfume to creating an elaborate card system to keep track of the, quote, 7,500 Robert Smiths. And if you can imagine, too, they're getting letters that are addressed to Bob Smith or Bobby Smith. Like, it's not always going to be Robert Smith. And Adams talks in her memoir about how they would open a package that had just been destroyed by rodents and they would look at how one thing had rubbed off on something else, or like the shape of an indent, or just the smallest, tiniest thing that would give them some clues about how is this package supposed to be put together and where is it supposed to go.
Yeah, what was kind of not entirely clear to me, but I'm sure I just wasn't paying enough attention. At some point, Lena kind of looks at like little insignias, almost like battalion emblems or something on envelopes, and then they manage to pin down where they are. And I'm like, that seems clever, but I don't get it. So that might just be me.
Yeah, she notices they're drawing little symbols, I guess, on the front of the envelope because The other thing is that because the different companies and battalions move around so much, that's part of the problem why the mail keeps getting returned, because it'll be like, oh, a company might be somewhere for 2 days and then they're moving on. So it has something to do with people, men, soldiers are writing like certain and like little insignia on the outside of the envelope. And that helps her to figure out where they've been or where they're going. And they can sort of like compare them to each other to track them. I don't really know the specifics, but that was the sense that I got.
Yeah, that seems right. And Holt is very, very upset by this too, that they're figuring out where these men are, even though they're supposed to figure out where these men are.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too, right? Because some of the mail they had the only way to figure out where it was supposed to go was to open it and to try and get some sense from the letterhead or from the signature or whatever of where it was supposed to go. And he was very mad that these black women were reading the mail of white soldiers.
It just makes me angry. It's just so stupid. Like, either let them do their jobs or just don't. But don't be a dick about it the entire time.
Yeah. The crummy thing too is that in real life, there was all these stories getting out about how they weren't doing their job and they weren't doing it properly. And even the black press in the United States was starting to pick it up and run stories about it. And obviously, this was absolutely terrible for morale. And, now we know that these women did an extraordinary job. But at the time, there was a real effort to, discredit them and tear them down.
Yeah. Isn't there also there's also a newspaper article, I think, in the movie illustrating this. So yeah, they do try and show you some of the context for it, which is nice, but it's not, I don't feel like it's super diligent or anything, the research. But we can do some research, it's fine.
Yeah.
3 members of the 6888 are killed when their mail van drives over an explosive. Adams is told that the army will not pay to have them buried properly, and instead they kind of collect money to arrange the burial themselves.
Yeah.
Sad.
In real life, Private Mary Bankston and Private Mary Barlow were killed in a vehicle accident on the 8th of July, 1945. A third soldier, Sergeant Dolores Brown, held on for 5 days until she also passed away. And they did indeed have to take up a collection for the funeral. They sent similarly sized women to be quote unquote fitted for the caskets. They actually had women amongst them who knew how to prepare bodies for a funeral. And so they did all of the work themselves, essentially. And these 3 women are actually 3 of the 4 women buried in the Normandy American Cemetery, the other being Elizabeth Richardson, who is an American Red Cross volunteer who was killed in a plane crash.
I thought it was good that this was included in the movie, but it also felt a little bit out of left field for me in the movie itself. So
yeah, I could see that. It's funny because there's a way where they could have done it where it would have felt like sudden and shocking and horrifying because that's how things happen in a war. But for some reason, it just felt uneven. Like it happened and you were like, oh, okay, that's where we were going, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what it was about the pacing that just didn't hit.
yeah, and also maybe this could have been one of those things where if the characters that ended up dying had been introduced to us a little bit better, it would have made me feel more.
Yeah, we didn't really get introduced to them at all, right? They just, just we just see them in a truck and it is like a very tense scene, I'm not gonna lie to you, but yeah, we don't really know who they are.
Yeah, I did like that right before we unfortunately have to see them die. They do kind of remind us that these women have trained to be in the army. They're like, we just need to rely on our training, and they saved the life, I think, of someone else who's also on the truck. And I thought that was a nice touch to it.
Yeah, I mean, Adams talks in her memoir about how when she went to officer school, they got most of the same training as the men. I mean, they didn't get a lot of the like military tactics kind of stuff, but like all the rest of it was the same. They did the map reading and the requisitioning and like, so yeah, these women would have had training for how to behave in a combat zone.
Yeah. And we obviously don't get to see them in one, but this is a nice way to remind us that they're not just postal workers. They actually joined the army.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the time when they were working in England, this would have been, the era of the V1 and V2 rockets, which we see a little bit in the movie. So it's not a safe work environment by any means. And then later on, they do go, they move over to the continent to work in France. And of course, at this point, France has been liberated, but still, they're pretty up close and personal with the action. Lena's friends find Abram's final letter to her, which we saw get put in the mail in the first scene. So Abram was obviously the pilot who went down. Someone tried to save him and couldn't, so they pulled the letter out of his pocket. It's all covered in blood, and they want to put it in the mail. So Lena's friends find it. She opens it. She's very, sad and upset about it. And Adams gives her the chance to visit Abram's grave at the cemetery after the service for the 3 young women who have been killed. So she goes to see his grave. It's supposed to be very moving, I guess.
Yeah, we get a little scene of him flying in his plane, and he's talking to her in his letter about a likelihood of his coming home is not as likely anymore. So it is sad, but also for me, we're at the wrong cemetery. I don't know if you noticed, but he would not have been buried there, but that's fine.
Well, I mean, all of this is wrong too, because the 3 women were actually killed in France and they're buried in Normandy. And we're still in England in the movie at this point. So none of this actually makes any sense. But, whatever.
Fair.
There's all these scenes in the movie where we get a hallucination of Abram, or a dream sequence where Abram is there with her after he's been killed. It's a lot. It feels schlocky.
Yeah, I agree. I get why they did it, to create more appeal, I think. But also, it feels entirely unnecessary to have him in the movie the entire time.
I know. I was like, sorry, Abram, you seem fine, but we don't need you.
Also, we didn't mention this before, but he has the most glib line about racism in the very beginning of the movie.
Oh my God, yeah. They have the face-off with the racist lady from their school, or the racist student. And then he's like, wow, I can't believe she hates you just because of the color of your skin. And then Lena is like, well, she also hates me because she's in love with you. It's just like, oh, okay. So racism is real, but also it could just be that she's jealous.
Yeah. General Holt comes to do an inspection, and he's not happy that Adams has the women working in shifts, so they are not all available to be inspected. He tells her that he's going to have a white officer come down and take charge, and he says this very meanly. And she replies, "Over my dead body, sir." And then she gets a round of applause after he leaves.
Yeah, I don't know if the round of applause is real. It might be a little much, but Adams in real life, this situation did happen. And she very much did say, "Over my dead body, sir," to a commanding officer, which she talks about in the book. And she talks about it like it was a moment where she left her body, man. She just was like, she's like, I don't know if it was because he said the word white officer. I don't know if it was the straw that broke the camel's back. She's like, I didn't even know what words I was going to say. And then they just came out of my mouth. And when, everyone was talking to her about it after, they're like, well, obviously you had to respond to him, but did you have to say it in those words? And she was like, but I kind of did have to say it in those words, though.
I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the applause thing also, because they stopped working right before, just so she'll go down to the crowds to be among them. And then they just all start applauding. And I was like, all right, but they could have just done it right after he'd left.
Yeah. Also, and then everyone clapped thing just makes it feel like it's not real, even though it is real,
It's just a bit much.
Yeah. So Halt attempts to get Adams court-martialed, but the mail begins coming through and the results speak for themselves. So someone's like, "Sir, look out the window." And then he looks out the window and all these guys are getting their mail. It's very convenient. In real life, what happened was that Adams knew that she was probably going to get court-martialed. And so she began preparing a counter court-martial, because there was this memorandum that had come out to the brass, basically advising them against using racially charged language, primarily because it would reveal to their British host that there was disunity in the American ranks, and not because of the racist language itself. And this memorandum wasn't even a directive. Adams knew it was, weak grounds, but she's like, well, I'm going to go for it. And the general supposedly dropped the charges because Adams had more rank than any other WWII officer presently in the ETO, and it would be too expensive to bring in senior WWII officers from the United States.
Wow.
Yeah.
Too much money.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason probably is that if there were a court-martial about this, it would also make him look bad. So
yes.
Eventually, Adams and the general ended up working together again. When the 688 got reassigned to France, they got there, and then she found out that that general had also been reassigned to France. And so, like, to his credit, I guess, he came right down to the 688. They were perfectly civil and pleasant to each other. He had a bit of a changed attitude. Their working relationship after that was fine. And he actually ended up sending his personal plane to bring her to Brussels for a conference.
That's nice.
And then we see the women that are walking through a train station when someone asks them if they're the 688, and they say yes. And a number of white officers salute them for their efforts, which, oh man, also feels so schlocky.
Yeah, I mean, I guess racism is solved now.
Well, and like part of the reason why this movie is so important is that these women really didn't get the recognition they deserved for 80 years, basically.
There's a clip of the real Lena at the end, as well as some pictures and footage of the real ladies of the 688. We also see them and hear them get recognized by Michelle Obama. And I did like the recognition they got at the very end of the movie. I like that every single one of their names was on the screen for a second, but then they kind of ruined it for me by putting a very modern song over top of it. And I was like, it's called The Journey, I think, or something. And I was like, oh, really? But that's just me. That's just a personal thing I don't like.
I just thought there was too much at the end of the movie, and maybe that's just personal preference. You know, I don't mind a couple of title cards, but it felt like it just kept going on and on and on and on. Because we also get a title card that says, the 688 Central Postal Directory Battalion was the only all-Black and women of color Women's Army Corps unit to serve in Europe during World War II. Arriving in Europe just before the end of the war, they were given the impossible task of delivering 18 million pieces of mail in 6 months. They did it in less than 90 days. The 688 brought communication and an important uplift in the morale of the soldiers. We don't need an end card to tell us that because that's the movie we just watched.
Yeah, they could have just said something about the 90 days or the less than 90 days instead of the whole thing again.
Yeah.
And like you said, there's quite a lot of it because then we get another bit of information. It says, on April 27, 2023, U.S. Army Base Fort Lee, named after the Civil War Confederate general, was renamed Fort Gregg Adams in honor of two Black U.S. Army pioneers, Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel George Adams. The Fort redesignation honoring Adams makes her the only Black woman in U.S. history to receive such an honor. Which is cool, but also not enough Black women are honored, so.
Yeah, it is cool. It's just, there's a lot that they try and like fit in at the end of this movie, which, you know, I'm not mad about finding out, you know, this kind of stuff, but I'm also just like, they didn't tell us what happened to Lena after the war, really. Like, we didn't get a lot of details about that. We didn't get tons of details about what happened to Adams after the war. It was just like, yeah, here's how they were commemorated later, and we're going to show you clips for like 5 or 6 minutes.
I think Lena in the movie, I mean the older Lena as we see her in real life, was like 100 or something. So she lived to be really old, which is good. And she did marry her boyfriend that she met while on duty. So that's nice.
Yeah, it is nice. I have some notes from Adams's memoir because she was just about the coolest lady ever. Can't reiterate enough that you should definitely pick up a copy. Adams left the Army in 1946 as a lieutenant colonel. She was second only in rank to the WWII commander. I believe she was one of only 2 Black women who got promoted like to major and beyond. So she was a pretty cool lady. And I have a few little situations from her memoir that I just thought illustrate the kind of life that she lived. So there's one incident where she came home for Christmas on leave during training. This would have been in 1942, I believe. And she went down to hear her father speak at an NAACP meeting. He was actually the local chairman. And at the meeting, someone came in and told her that the KKK had surrounded their house. And so when they went home, they had to sit inside in the dark all night, wide awake with a shotgun, with all these white guys sitting in cars up and down their street outside. And in the morning, the guys had gone, but, you know, it's one of those nights where you're just like, I don't know what's going to happen here.
No, that sounds really terrifying.
Yeah.
And I hate that these people exist. and that no one else does anything about it.
Well, yeah, literally. Plus, I mean, a lot of Klansmen were police officers, right? So
Yeah.
once she was in the army and when she'd been promoted pretty far, there were plans at one point to have what they called a separate but equal black WAC training regiment, because obviously when she joined, they didn't have segregated living quarters and stuff, but they were all trained sort of in the same facility. And they wanted Adams to lead this separate black training regiment. And she actually said that she'd rather quit. And she basically walked out, and they ended up dropping the plans because she knew how separate but equal goes, right? So she was like, no, we're not going to have our own separate thing where you guys have an excuse to not give us as many resources and not give us the facilities and whatever. So she basically just she put her foot down about that, and they were like, okay, well, I guess we're not doing it.
I do like that there's a woman like her out there, or was anyway, that did command respect from the people that were being shitty to her.
Yeah. Absolutely. By the time she wrote her memoir, of course, she was older and she had the benefit of retrospection and stuff. But when you think about her as a young woman in her 20s, making these kinds of stands, knowing full well that that could be the end of her career, it's just extraordinary. It's so impressive.
Yeah, not only the end of her career, I guess, but also if she were court-martialed, she might have lost other rights in just day-to-day life, as we saw with the Tuskegee Airmen.
Yeah. She talks too in her memoir about when she was based in the United States. Sometimes white officers that she knew would invite her to the officers club. And if she went with them, she would always hear about it later. She would always get chewed out by someone for being in the white officers club. And so in the movie, they kind of make it seem like she's deliberately being a rabble rouser and trying to desegregate these clubs, but she's genuinely just going somewhere where she should be allowed to go and then getting in trouble for it later. And actually,
Yeah.
when they were based in the UK, the Red Cross decided that they didn't think it was okay. Like basically the white wax and the black wax, when they would go on leave to London, they would all stay in the same quarters or whatever. But the Red Cross decided at a certain point that this wasn't good enough. And they wanted to make a segregated hotel for the black wax to stay in. And Adams was like, none of my women will ever stay there. There hasn't been any complaints. There hasn't been any problems. I don't know why we're putting in this segregation is bullshit. And then she went back to her unit and she was basically like, look, I can't make you not stay at the segregated hotel when you go to London, but I hope that everyone will back me up on this. And all the women did. They basically boycotted the segregated hotel that the Red Cross had prepared.
Excellent. I don't understand why, when there isn't even a problem, they're gonna create one.
Literally, it's so stupid. The Red Cross kept telling Adams, well, we just think your women will be more comfortable. And she was like, well, has anyone complained? And they were like, no, but because the thing was, when the Americans would go overseas, of course, this is not to say that Great Britain in the 1940s was a bastion of progressivism or anything, but even the British thought that the way that the Americans were racist was just completely above and beyond. Like, they were just shocked by how all these segregationist policies and how racist the Americans were. And the black women actually found that local British families would be happy to have them come stay in their homes and come over for dinner and all this kind of stuff. So they actually found that they were often treated a lot better by the locals than they were by their own side.
I think we can just say that 40s America is just dumb and really racist and annoying.
I did pick up one specific quote from the Adams memoir because I just wanted to show off that even though she was this very tough, no nonsense person, she did have this kind of wry sense of humor. And I thought this quote was really funny. So she's in training and she says, because my college major had been mathematics and I had taught the subject, I was sure that map reading would be a snap since it was so mathematical. What a disappointment that my worst grade came when we had our first examination in map reading. It was right up my alley, but the alley was so dark that I did not see where we were going.
I love that. I do like that in this movie they do make an example of how educated Adams was. Like, she had like 3 majors or something, I don't remember.
I want to say she had a master's degree already when she went into the army, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and I don't remember where this is used in the movie. I think it might be when they're talking about giving them an actual mission or something like that. I don't remember. But yeah, what an amazing lady.
Just really cool. I can't emphasize enough. You should read the memoir. It's really good.
Yes. So we recommend the memoir for sure. I haven't read it yet, but I'm sure I would.
It's a pretty quick read. It's let me see here. It's only 200 pages, so
Oh, that's not bad. I can do that.
yeah.
we still need to rate this movie. How many terrible Abram hallucinations out of 10 would you rate this movie?
Gosh, I think I would rate this movie 6 terrible Abram hallucinations out of 10. It gets some points for being a movie that probably should have been made before now. It's very important. It gets some points because I thought Kerry Washington was great. She did her absolute best with a script that was probably a struggle at times. And there are big chunks of the movie that are pretty historically accurate. A lot of the little incidents that happen in the movie did happen in real life. So I did enjoy that aspect. But man, I just wish that it were less hallmarky, that I don't know. I just wish it were better. I wish I had enjoyed my watching experience a little bit more, How many terrible Abram hallucinations out of 10 would you rate this movie?
I also would give this movie six terrible Abram hallucinations out of 10. Like I said, I did enjoy my watching experience. I had a good time watching it. I thought it was quite a pretty movie. It looked really good. It was great to see a movie with so many Black women in it, and I wish we got more of those. But like you, I wish the writing and the directing was better than it was. So it's not bad. It's not great. I guess it's maybe a little bad. I wouldn't watch it again very soon, I don't think. But glad the story's out there. Hopefully it'll be a starting point for more movies like this about women in World War II. I would very much like that.
Gosh, I would love I feel like we have so many movies about what men were doing in World War II, which is fine. They're interesting. Obviously, we love them. We have a podcast, but I'm also like, man, I've just read so many nonfiction stories about what women were up to, and I'm like, why isn't this a movie? Why isn't this a movie? I find myself thinking that all the time.
Yeah, I feel like we should do another piece of media with women, with women in it. Yeah.
We're on a, we didn't really like the Lee movie either, but we're on a quest to find a piece of war media starring women that we think is a 10 out of 10.
We did like Sophie Scholl, though, to be honest.
We did like Sophie Scholl. I did more or less like Bomb Girls, except the movie.
What movie? It does not exist.
Yeah, we don't acknowledge the movie.
I guess that's it for this specific episode. Are you reading anything?
So this week I read A Christmas Carol. I used to read it every year at Christmas and I kind of got out of it, but I got it. I downloaded it again this year. I read it. So that was really nice. And I have a couple of books that I got most of the way through and didn't quite finish. So I'm going to try and finish those before the new year so I can start with a clean slate.
Perfect.
Are you reading anything new?
I am reading something new. I'm reading Catch 22. I'm not going to be able to finish this book in time for a recording about Catch 22, but I am enjoying it, kind of. I'm finding it kind of difficult to read a bit. And also it's pretty long, so it's not going as fast as I would like it to go. But after this, I have to read Jeep Show, because we're also doing a recording on Jeep Show very soon. Lots of books.
Yes, I'll be curious to see. I think that Jeep Show, the writer has clearly read Catch 22, so I'll be curious to see if you think that they compare in any way.
Ooh, I would be interesting to hear that from the writer too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So, I guess that's it for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. You can follow us on Instagram. You can find our podcast wherever you get your podcast, and you can rate us 5 stars. You can send an episode to your best friend or your enemy if you don't like the episode. What else can you do? You can go to our website at rosieTheReviewer.com, and you can definitely listen to us again next week.
See you later.
Bye!